Sold. I'm sold. This was not a commercial episode, but everything this guy was not peddling, I'm now down for. It was fascinating. Okay, wait, start over. We talked to a very knowledgeable person on mushrooms, Amir Karian.
He's got his own mushroom empire. And it was crazy because he was the total opposite of all of the caricature mushroom people that I've ever talked to. He was
not a goofy hippie.
Not a goofy hippie. He was thoughtful. He had studies to back up. He was like logical in his thought process. He like referred to scientific studies. It was like the total opposite of the classic mushroom guy. And my brain was just like, hey man, you want some mushrooms to take your brain to a higher brain function, brain plane, brain levels, brain galaxies, stars, stardust, and I'm like, chill. But anyway, this was the opposite of that. He was amazing.
Yeah, it makes me super curious to try it out for myself, honestly. Recovery
was a big one. Brain function was a big one. I like how he pointed out that it's not going to take one pill and immediately feel it. It's going to, you supplement it over a long time. And suddenly you're like, oh, wow, I have more clarity. I'm quicker on my feet. I have better recovery. I have blah, blah, blah. The studies about Alzheimer's was crazy. Oh my God.
That's not so.
But
yeah, it makes me psyched for the future and what they're going to continue to discover.
I know. The network, the underground mushroom network.
I almost didn't ask that, and I'm so glad that I was like, he doesn't have something to talk about for this, and then so much more than even the initial source that I heard from.
It was amazing. Turns out trees are talking to other trees, so that's a new one.
Stay tuned.
Welcome to Total Fitheads.
Serious fitness for not so serious people.
Hi, Amir. Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm stoked to talk about this one. I was just telling Max before we started that this is one of those subjects where I'd start diving in and I'm like, I wish I just had someone to explain it to me. And then here you are.
Well, glad I can help.
So let's start with how you got into this and your whole origin story, and let the fitheads know how this began.
Yeah, definitely. So I am kind of by default a third generation mushroom farmer. I grew up in Los Angeles, California, and I knew that my family, a subset of my family, was involved in mushroom farming in Northern California. But it wasn't really until I had my own personal health problems that then got me into this space. I was, shortly after college, always a healthy guy, always athletic, into sports. And then my health just started rapidly declining almost out of nowhere. And it took me so long to figure out what was going on, but I was finally diagnosed with Lyme disease, which, long story short, was cured by kind of a holistic protocol, different supplements and diet, mainly with a lot of mushrooms. And so that really was what piqued my interest into this industry. And then going back to, it was almost serendipitous that I had a family growing mushrooms. So I, got involved with the family business and knew that I wanted to grow these different varieties that we were growing. We were always the gourmet guys. We made the portobellos and all those, but we never did these medicinal mushrooms. So that's been my almost passion project, is how can we grow these and make it a part of our business here in California and help other people experience what I experienced with, I don't want to say mushrooms will cure illness. It's, but how can mushrooms help heal people that feel that they're unhealable? That's what Lyme disease is. It's right now it's thought in the medical industry to be an incurable chronic illness. And so, we have to look at almost alternative remedies when the medical community doesn't know how to solve them. So that's a little bit about, how I got into space.
Well, people can have Lyme disease and they're kind of tired, and people can have Lyme disease and they can't get out of bed. What was your experience like?
I had every symptom from A to Z. It was pretty crazy. And I think that's why it was so hard to diagnose me. I had chronic fatigue, couldn't get off the couch most days. My nausea was just morning to night, just nauseous. Brain fog got so bad at one point that I couldn't read anymore. I would stare at words in front of me and I couldn't make it out. And that was the scariest thing to me, because you don't know, shoot, am I worthless now? I can't think. So yeah, that was a little bit about, how I dealt with it. And it was going on for so long, and I was going to some of the top, doctors that I can find around me. And no one could diagnose it. People said, dude, your blood tests are fine. We don't know what's wrong with you. It might be just depression or something in your head. And that was so frustrating. I remember when I finally got the call from one of my doctors saying, we found it. It's Lyme disease. I was so happy, because I didn't know what Lyme disease was. And I was just happy, just my ignorance was like, okay, cool. Give me the pill. I'm good to go now. But I realized quickly it was going to be a longer journey than that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then traditional medicine failed you in diagnosing it, and then also failed you in getting you out of your symptoms, right? That's what pushed you to this holistic thing. Exactly.
Because, when I would go back to the doctors, now that I have my diagnosis, I would always ask, okay, so how long do I have to take this medication, and when am I going to be cured? And every single one of them told me the same thing. It's that, Amir, you have a chronic illness. We can get you to a healthy state, but you're going to live with this. I think I was just, I was 21 at the time. I was way too stubborn to accept that answer. So I just kept doing research, and so fortunately I was referred to this, not a physician, a nutritionist who had been claiming to cure Lyme disease. And when you hear that, after you hear from so many physicians, learned doctors, that, you can't cure this, you're super skeptical, but also intrigued, because I was desperate. I'll do anything you tell me at this point. And I started working with her, and she put me on the most unbelievably strict diet for 2 years almost. I was eating steamed vegetables and a small 5-ounce piece of either wild caught salmon or grass-fed lamb. And my cheat day would be a sweet potato. It was it was so strict. Oil was strictly forbidden, so I couldn't go to any restaurants. I think that was the hardest part. Is it isolated me. But then on top of the diet, it was a lot of herbal supplements that I would take to support various functions of my body. Let's support the liver with, milk thistle and these different herbs, and let's support the kidneys with this. And almost every supplement that I would take had a medicinal mushroom in them. So that was really what started my journey into researching these mushrooms and trying to figure out, why doesn't anyone know about this? Why doesn't everyone know about this?
Yeah, and what is your answer to that?
Yeah, I was going to
say, sort of gaining some popularity.
Yeah, it's a good question.
If you want to just do the podcast, just ask the questions and answer them. That'd be good.
That was, I didn't really know either. I feel like that's kind of how a lot of alternative medicine is. It's not a patentable drug. So pharmaceutical companies, they want to find the silver bullet chemical in a plant, and they want to combine it with something else and patent it so they can make their money. And because of the fact that they can make money off of it, that's what funds the clinical studies. Because it takes about $1 billion to really go through phases of clinical trials for a drug to be validated. With the mushroom, if you have reishi mushrooms, no one can patent reishi mushrooms. So who's going to put up the money to fund clinical studies when, how are we going to get our return? We can't patent and sell this. And other people are going to benefit off of the money we put up for clinical studies. So I think that's a reason a lot of Eastern kind of herbal medicine is not super, super conventional and popular. But I'm at least happy now is mushrooms are starting to become more mainstream. I don't know if you guys are starting to see more and more pop up in different products, but
Yeah. And guest talking about it. I can't tell if I'm just in an echo chamber though, and we're in that world and there's still a lot of people that need to hear about it.
Yeah, that's true.
I think for me, the problem is a lot of times the people that it's coming from, I'm like,
don't blink.
Yeah. We've had a couple of weirdos talk to me about the crazy, and it does sound outlandish. Can you talk about some benefits in a logical way? Or without also selling me crypto? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. By the way, I'm selling Bitcoin on the side.
Exactly.
So I totally get that. I think that's like what the history of mushroom use has been. A lot of this like woodsy, hippie kind of a stigma behind it. And that takes a while to destigmatize. So yeah, hearing it in a non-scientific way can almost turn a lot of people off. And I'm like that, I have a spiritual side to me, but if you start talking like, it's going to elevate your consciousness, I'm like, okay, man, where's the science? So, but there's more and more data and more clinical studies happening with these mushrooms. And I think that's what's validating the industry as a whole. Because if you don't have that, you just have snake oil pretty much. For example, there's this mushroom called turkey tail. It's called turkey tail because if you Google it, it literally looks like the tail of a turkey when it grows out. And it's a prescribed drug in parts of the world like Japan, and it's shown effective for kind of like adjunct therapy for people going through chemotherapy. So they supplement with turkey tail on the side, and they notice an increase in the effectiveness of the radiation therapy, as well as a reduction in tumor size. So, there's a lot of promise with that mushroom. Different mushroom like Cordyceps. You guys look like athletes, obviously, sitting in the gym. But there's this mushroom called Cordyceps, one of my favorites. And that's considered the athlete's mushroom. It has been shown to increase VO2 max, so oxygen efficiency in the blood and in the muscles. So when they do studies on athletes, they'll have a supplement group with Cordyceps, and then they'll have a control group. And the supplement group, on doing things like laps in a pool or just riding a stationary bike, they notice their time to fatigue increases significantly when they're supplementing with Cordyceps. And it also can help with things like adrenal fatigue and supporting the adrenals for heavy coffee drinkers. I'm such a heavy coffee drinker that Cordyceps is like my go-to. Just in my head, it balances out the wear and tear I'm doing on my body. I know it doesn't perfectly work like that, but I definitely notice it helps me sleep better at night those days I drink too much coffee. So yeah, there's a lot of science coming out, and so it's validating at least.
Yeah, well, and you've also done your 1-of-1 study that it worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and then you start listing these mushrooms, and it feels like there are so many. And is it the gourmet thing, or should I look at it as a supplement? I don't even know how to frame this because there's so much. It feels like it's overwhelming. Are there a handful of ones that you would suggest people take a look at first?
You're right. There's so many mushrooms, and we're discovering new species every day. It's the largest kingdom, larger than plants and animals combined. Most people kind of categorize as there's your gourmet mushrooms, and then there's your medicinal mushrooms. And then obviously there's your psychedelic mushrooms. But pretty much all your gourmet mushrooms have really great medicinal benefits too. So if you think of your common button mushrooms or portobello mushrooms, the ones that are up pizza toppers, those are only considered gourmet to most people. They have a lot of medicinal value. We're actually working with a physician right now studying the effectiveness of a chemical in those mushrooms called ergothioneine for potential to treat prostate and breast cancer. So obviously, there needs to be more science behind this before you make any claims like that. But it's showing a lot of promise. So where I would recommend starting is just increase your mushroom intake. I mean, whether it's your grocery store oyster, shiitake, or if you want to look at more of the what people call medicinals, like lion's mane to help with their brain function, reishi. There's kind of the top popular ones right now, which would be cordyceps, reishi, lion's mane, chaga. A lot of people making like chaga cappuccinos, calling them chagachinos. So yeah, there's your kind of your core mushrooms there. What are you guys, just out of curiosity, are you mushroom eaters? Yeah, I know some people, they either love them or they hate them.
I don't like them. I don't like the texture. I don't mind the taste. Tastes fine. But I typically have not been into it. But I love taking supplements. So I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. That's your way in. Yeah. So for a lot of people, it just grosses them out. It has that slimy kind of texture. So yeah, if you can take them in like powder form or capsule form, it's, the way to go. That's how I do it most of the days. So.
Yeah. Do you see a difference between eating the whole thing or capsule or powder?
I think capsule, you can stay, and powder, you can stay more consistent with it. Whereas when you're eating it, I don't know. For me, if I eat too many mushrooms, I start to feel like, okay, I don't want any more mushrooms for another week. So taking it in like supplement form helps me be consistent with it because they have a compounding effect, just like vitamins. You take, people think it's like caffeine. For example, Cordyceps, the athlete's mushroom, they think they're going to get this burst of energy because people are so used to stimulants, or lion's mane, which is shown to help with like brain function, cognitive support. People think they eat one mushroom or take a capsule, they're going to be like they're on Adderall. It's not really like that. It's like a vitamin at the end of the day. It supports your body foundationally. I mean, you guys would know if you're taking, protein after your workouts or supplementing with creatine, you won't notice a difference after one day. Right. So you got to stay consistent with these things.
Do you think that's a part of the reason why it's not widely used? Because it isn't that immediate gratification of the only thing I can think of, caffeine.
Yeah, I think so. And what's actually really interesting? Some of the companies that have popularized it on a retail level in the US are pairing it with coffee, which is genius. At first, I think it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, thinking, okay, I don't want mushrooms in my coffee. But they've, made it in a way so you can barely taste the mushrooms, and you're pairing it with an addictive substance that people drink every single day. So it's now becoming like a routine for people to take their mushrooms. It's pretty smart. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, I've also heard of people replacing coffee with mushrooms, or am I remembering incorrectly that they're saying, oh, this chagachino, well, now you don't have to be addicted to caffeine.
Yeah, it's taking off that kind of idea. I think the trend was really, and still going, is really talks about how we're so, as a nation and world is just so addicted to caffeine and is disruptive to our sleep patterns. And so why not supplement with adaptogenic mushrooms instead? If that can help support your body foundationally, why do you need the caffeine? Which, I think that is like a phenomenal concept. If I didn't have to drink coffee every day, I definitely would cut it out, but I'm just not there yet.
We had a sleep person on the Epic Pod a long while ago, and she pointed out that caffeine doesn't actually make you less tired; it just masks the symptoms of you being tired.
Yeah,
Max, stop telling people that. It's like a life ruiner.
I know, it really is. Yeah, I'll never want to drink coffee again.
Well, with the adaptogenic ones, then wouldn't you want to take them in the evening, or is it simultaneously with the stimulant to counteract right then?
I don't think there's enough science to really prove. No one's really done the science of, okay, if you pair this with coffee, does it counteract? There's companies making claims that, these adaptogenic mushrooms are really alkaline. So if you pair them with something acidic like coffee and neutralize it, it sounds nice and it's a great marketing gimmick, but we don't have any proof of that. So yeah, I think, different mushrooms have different functions. Some support immune systems, some support brain function. And so people are just pairing them with literally anything these days and marketing it as, okay, this is a lollipop. I'm going too far, but I'm not kidding. I've seen like shampoos, conditioners, soaps, deodorant with mushrooms in them now.
Nice.
Yeah, because the mushrooms themselves have antibacterial properties. So the idea is if we put it in shampoo, maybe it can clean the bacteria off our scalps.
I mean, it's smart to put your money into marketing as opposed to clinical testing, because why do that?
Exactly.
But yeah, let's get into that because I feel like I've heard a lot of bad mouthing out there in the mushroom world. Like, oh, these ones are using the wrong parts or they're lying about how effective the amount of mushroom is in here. What are your thoughts on all that?
Ooh, we can go so far down the rabbit hole with this. It gets really technical. I know. Yeah, like you're watching. No,
it's a podcast. We have so much time to go.
Please, by all means.
It can get a little like overly scientific for average consumers. I think at the end of the day, consumers just want high quality and they want to trust that the company they're buying from is a high quality producer. The main debate out there, without getting too technical, is there's mycelium, which is the root system of the mushroom. It's really the organism itself. When you look at fungi, most of the lifespan is spent underground, like this mycelial web that is secreting enzymes into the environment and breaking things down and digesting and colonizing the soil. Then when, there's optimal conditions, it sprouts a little fruit body, which is what we think of as a mushroom. That fruit body is really just a reproductive organ of the fungus. So when it thinks it's going to die, it sprouts out this little fruit so that it can sporulate and reproduce more. So what traditionally is eaten is the fruit body. People in the past have not eaten the mycelium. And so there's a lot of companies saying you need only the fruit body. If you eat the mycelium, it's trash. There's a lot of companies only growing the mycelium. They don't even grow the fruits and they sell that. And so there's this debate as to which one to go to. And it's hard for the consumer to know. Most people, quite frankly, don't even care. They just, they just want to know, is it going to work, right? What we're learning, the data we've been compiling, is that there's benefits to both, and they should be used in conjunction with each other for different purposes. Like cordyceps, for example, we know that the fruit bodies have polysaccharides that are essentially, it's a fancy word for carbohydrate that can stimulate the immune system. It has antibacterial and antiviral function, but the mycelium has a much broader range of antioxidant activity. So they have their parts to play. And I think a lot of companies that say only go with one or only go with this one, they a lot of times don't know. The science is still developing, but using only one plant part kind of limits the potency and limits the benefits you're going to get from it. I hope that wasn't too long-winded.
Is there anything to suggest that you have to use both or separating them?
Separating them, there's nothing to suggest that you need to take them separately, if that makes sense. So the way we grow, for example, there's a mushroom, lion's mane. It's the most popular medicinal mushroom in the US right now. Since COVID, you look at kind of the trend curve of this mushroom, it's exploding and it's still going. And you would think it'd be more of the immune boosting mushrooms, but for some reason, lion's mane is just exploding.
It's because it's got a dope name.
That's so true. You just give all the mushrooms cool names.
Tiger Claw.
Yeah, that's the there's one called Tiger's Milk, actually. But yeah, so lion's mane, there's chemicals in the mycelium that help with brain function that aren't in the fruits. And there's chemicals in the fruits that help with certain functions that aren't in the mycelium. So when we grow them, we grow the mycelium it digests the food source that we give it, and then it starts to fruit out the top when it's ready, almost like a flower, spreading its root system and then flowering when it's ready. And we take all of that and we blend it up into a final product. So you're getting every kind of full spectrum component of the mushroom's life cycle.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And are you looking at this like it's a food or a supplement?
It's a good question. I mean, what's the difference? I look at most supplements. I mean, if it's an herbal supplement, it's both. It's just functional food, I guess. I think that's what I would call it.
Okay.
Food that has a medicinal benefit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Would you consider, like, I guess it would have to be something herbal. Are there any herbal supplements you guys use for any purpose?
Herbal. I did try tart cherry juice I guess that's still kind of food.
I don't even know what that is. What does that do?
It's supposed to help with recovery.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't notice anything different.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's the problem with supplements. It's just so hard to see a difference. Was there like lion's mane, for an example, after 2 weeks of using it, do you have some sort of story where you're like, oh, I do notice a difference? I mean, beyond the fact that you cured your freaking disease.
Yeah. I think that's the most proven, but
sure. Good point.
For me, I notice I take it every day. Lion's mane is one of those mushrooms I take every single day. And I notice when I stop taking it, I'm not as quick. My words don't come to me as quickly in conversation. I forget names more easily, and little subtle things like that. And I've heard the same thing from other people. They just feel like, they're not a wired, like they're on Adderall, but they just feel like they're clear headed. And there's more and more science behind actual studies. People are finding or scientists are finding that lion's mane may help reverse and even prevent symptoms of Alzheimer's. That sounds like a crazy claim. They've done studies with mice. So far, it's only been animal trials with mice where they take these mice and they introduce them to a maze. It's called the Y maze test. So on one sector of the maze, they have food. And on the other side of the maze, it's empty. So the mice are introduced to the front, and quickly, through several repetitions, they're able to know, okay, you go down and make a right, you get food. If you go to the left, you get nothing. And they learn that so rapidly that they just go right every time. Then they wanted to introduce symptoms of Alzheimer's, which is essentially a plaque, an amyloid plaque buildup that happens over your brain that starts to interfere with the neural connections in your brain. So they injected these mice with a plaque peptide that induced that plaque. And they noticed right away the mice were disoriented. They weren't able to find the cheese anymore, the food at the end of the maze. Then they, dissected some of the mice to confirm that, okay, they did develop that plaque just like Alzheimer's patients. And then the other sample of the mice that were injected started supplementing with lion's mane mushrooms. And very rapidly, their memory retention came back and they were able to almost fully recover and find the cheese again. And when they then dissected those mice, they found that the plaques had completely dissolved. So there are studies like that are kind of blowing people's minds and showing that maybe this isn't just a way to prevent Alzheimer's if you supplement with it, day to day, but it can actually reverse symptoms as well. We need to go into, human clinical trials before we can make any of those claims, but it's at least exciting and promising. So.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's worth trying on yourself. Unless there's side effects. Have you heard of any sort of negative reaction?
There's been no real negative side effects correlated with supplement use of most of these mushrooms. There's certain chemicals in your plain button mushrooms that they found you can get toxicity from if you over ingest. But the amount you would have to over ingest is you'd have to eat 20 tons of these mushrooms to get toxicity levels. It's like pot. People say like you can't overdose on weed unless you smoke like 100 times your body weight. No one's gonna get to that point,
I might though, because I've seen that you've mentioned that it could be a meat alternative. I'm a vegan now for freaking 20 days. It's been. How can I use mushrooms to be happy with not eating meat?
I'm actually really curious. How do you feel after these 20 days? Because I did it and I absolutely hated it. But curious.
Yeah, interesting. It feels like it's weird opposite end of the spectrum. Like when I'm having freaking chia pudding, I'm thinking, oh, this is exactly what my body needs. I'm just like soaking it up. This feels good. It feels like it's doing what it should. And then also I'm really hungry a lot. Yeah.
Meat is filling so much more than carbs. I noticed when I did it, I lost so much weight, and I'm already a pretty lean guy. I looked like I was starving. And yeah, I didn't feel like I had the same motivation day to day. Maybe I didn't do it long enough. I should have let my body adapt to it, but.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought that your body gets used to it. Well, what was your reasoning for trying it?
I mainly because I didn't want to I'm very pro primitive diet. Like, how are we evolved to eat? And that's what I believe. Like, there's essential nutrients in meat that you cannot get from a vegan diet. And so I kind of, that's the way I think, is like, why would you not be able to get those from plants if you were not supposed to eat meat as in your body? But I didn't want to knock people before I tested it for myself. And that was the reason I tried it for a little bit. I don't think I did it justice. I probably will do it again at some point.
I respect that though. Yeah. Well, I mean, mushrooms is a meat alternative. That I've also seen you talk about it being like a clothing and building alternatives. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah. So we're partnered with this really cool company right now. They seem like they're still a startup, but they've been around for 10 years, but they're doing startup level, really crazy conceptual things. First product they started with is a meat alternative. So that mycelium, that root system of the mushroom, they found a way to grow it without a food source. So it grows kind of above the food source. If you imagine, let's say you get a tub and you fill it with food, and the mycelium grows within the food and around it and colonizes it. And then it's able to grow several inches above that food as a pure layer of mushroom mycelium. It looks like a marshmallow, almost like puffing up. And these guys have found a way to take that layer of mycelium, compress it, and then give it flavor, because mushroom mycelium, essentially it's flavorless for the most part. So any flavoring you can give it, it'll retain. And because it's net-like, it has fibers and it feels like muscle fibers. So they've learned how to make it into bacon as their first product. And I kid you not, you cannot tell the difference. It tastes exactly like bacon. It's pretty crazy. And it has the protein levels of bacon. And they're looking at, how to do this with chicken and steak. And so far, it looks identical. They're still working on the texture and the flavorings. But if you look up, mycelium steak, you'd think this is just a picture of a steak, and they're claiming it's mycelium, but it's really, really cool what these guys are doing with it. And I prefer that over a lot of them, what do you call them? The vegan meats out there.
Meat alternative.
Yeah,
Beyond and Impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Did you guys try those?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're great.
They taste good.
Yeah, they taste really good. Yeah.
It feels like, it's harming my body more than doing good.
Yeah, it's still a processed food, but I support the mission, it's a sustainable way to eat meat. But yeah, it's mushroom mycelium, it's pure mycelium. So you don't have that processing. All you have is flavorings like spices and stuff. So
Yeah.
I would lean that way over, the other, but both are awesome concepts. Yeah. And then the other one you mentioned, the clothing, same way they're compressing it, but instead of compressing it in a way that looks like meat, they'll cut it thinner and they'll compress it even more, and it forms a fabric like leather. And it literally looks like leather and it feels like leather. And so they're making it into like purses and shoes, and they did a collab with Adidas. I kid you not. Like, you can look up Adidas mushroom shoe. They did a collab with them for the Stan Smiths, and it looks like, leather. They did a collab with Hermes, making one of their purses. One of the companies working with Stella McCartney, designing some new fashion mushroom lines. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but it's happening.
I mean, I hope you have a pair.
I don't.
Come on, he ate them.
Need to get some.
I mean, it sounds like a complex process, but that is actually more sustainable than, I guess, killing a cow to make leather.
Definitely. I mean, you can grow it, and you don't have to feed that cow. So yeah, it's going to be a sustainable alternative for sure. And if it's almost like, if you can't tell the difference, why not? Why do we have to grow cows for purses? So I mean, it's promising. I think we're going to see a lot more mushrooms in like everyday packaging materials, insulation, things like that.
Do you think it's the stigma is sort of falling now? Because people, I think, fortunately, will still connect mushrooms with hippies. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's definitely becoming destigmatized slowly but surely. I think part of that has to do with this like psychedelic movement that's happening too in the world. Now it's not just, okay, this is a drug and you're just tripping and, there's no insight from this. You're just high. But I think there's more science, most of the money in this industry is being poured into that right now, psychedelic studies. And the fact that people are able to put data behind the last 50 years of kind of woo-woo conversation around it, it's destigmatizing it. It's like, okay, there's actually use and benefit behind this technology. So it's slowly becoming more commonplace. This is a good thing. I mean, you need it to become commonplace for it to become a readily usable technology.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's going to follow the same model as all the marijuana path, social path that it's taken?
So far, it looks like it. I think there's 10 to 100 times more medicinal possibilities with mushrooms than cannabis. Right now, the way it's being used is through, it's just strictly research-based right now, but the first level is therapy-based. So they've done some clinical trials with terminally ill cancer patients that were just like paralyzed of the thought of their own mortality. And they give them one high-level dose of psilocybin or psychedelic mushrooms, and their fears vanished almost overnight. And they really came to terms and, found happiness in their last few weeks. And now they're doing more and more research with it for things like addiction to cigarettes and alcohol and depression and PTSD and things like that. But, how will it be used in the medical community? Will you be able to like get a card and go buy shrooms? Possibly one day. Right now it's strictly, physician assisted therapy. So you would, you're not going to a doctor who's going to write a prescription for you and say, okay, go buy your mushrooms. You're going to sit with a therapist who, you're going to be assisted with this psychedelic trip. They're going to prep you over a course of a session or two to get you ready for the experience. And then they'll give you the dose and you take it under their direction, 4 or 5 hour trip, and they'll really walk you through it. I'm a big believer that the mushrooms are a tool not the medicine in this case, right? It's a way to expand your mind and rewire the connections in your brain to allow the therapy to be most effective. So that's why I think it's going to be, most beneficial in that light. Is there a benefit to taking it home and doing it on your own? Absolutely. But I don't think it's going to be as effective as, the therapy route for like severe cases. Beyond that, we'll probably see it in like dispensaries and things like that. And then, I think, it'll get regulated to the point where it's, most people can just purchase it and grow it on their own. Well, we'll see. We're not that. Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is exciting. Yeah. I think, I don't know what state you guys are in, but some states are definitely way ahead of the curve, like Washington, Oregon, and California.
The hippie states. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Where are you guys from?
We're both in LA.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. So we'll see it happen faster.
Wait, isn't you're growing in California?
We're growing in California, yeah. So we have 3 farms up north in kind of the Monterey Bay area, and a spawn facility, which I'm at right now. Spawn is the seed of the mushroom, essentially. And then we have a few other farms in different states like Texas, Pennsylvania, Florida, Illinois, and a couple in Mexico.
Huh. Yeah, you talk about tripping, but what about that? There's all this chatter about microdosing lately.
Yeah, that's it's cool. I think it's like a trend that's growing. Everyone wants to get in on it. I don't think there's enough science. I try to be super careful with what I say, because I think when, we've been in this industry for 50 years and we try to be very scientific in our approach, especially in our claims. We don't want to claim anything that's not validated. And right now, microdosing isn't. That's not to say it has no effect, but we just don't have the science to say it's effective and it does anything really. There's been studies coming out with mice that show one single dose of psilocybin mushrooms is able to really rapidly increase the neurite outgrowth in the prefrontal cortex, long term, not just right away. It's just like these are lasting effects. But is that, microdosing with humans? If we do it every other day or every couple of days, does it have that effect? We have no data yet that's been validated. I microdose when I'm not in the US, and I'll make that one super clear. And I genuinely like it. I feel that I get a benefit from it, but yeah, like I said, there's no science to prove it, so you got to be careful with that. But I'm sure you guys notice you're in LA. Is it just me, or does it seem like everyone at a party, no one brings weed anymore? Everyone has mushrooms now. It's like it's taken over.
I was just at a party and some dude handed me chocolate microdose, whatever. So mushrooms in chocolate. Obviously, I didn't take it. It's definitely not in my house right now. But he was also like packaged as though it was to be sold for retail and had like nutrition facts and ingredients. I was like, is this going to a store or what? I don't understand. Crazy, it was right? So put together. Yeah,
I know. There's a lot of those companies now that they just get packaging and they melt down chocolate and they sprinkle their homegrown mushrooms in it and they make it look so legit. It's all sold black market, people hand to hand. It's crazy. It looks legit. It's just not yet. Oh, I have a crazy story for you, actually. I met this guy. He hit me up on Instagram and he wanted to meet me because he found out, I was involved with this big mushroom operation here. And he said, hey, next time you're in LA, I want you to come down and meet me. So I met him at a gas station. It's not as sketchy as it's not as sketchy as it sounds. He's a friend of a friend.
It was a Chevron. Okay, so
yeah, exactly. It was a Tesla charging station.
Yeah, exactly. He was a friend of a good friend, so I didn't feel weird when he said meet me at a gas station. He just didn't want to give me his address because everything was so under the radar. So he meets me there. I get into his car, and he drives like a block away. Again, if he wasn't a friend of a very good friend, I would not be doing this. But I had a phone call with him earlier before meeting him, so I felt, comfortable in a sense. He pulls up. This kid's like 23 years old. He pulls up to this multi-million-dollar mansion in Hollywood, and opens these like giant castle doors, and it looks like I'm in like cocaine Colombia, except of mushrooms. There's like 50 John Lennon looking hippies just packing up pounds and pounds of shrooms in bags, and getting it ready for distribution. And then he's like, follow me, man. Takes me into all the different bedrooms, and there's just racks and racks and racks of mushrooms growing. I told him, like, this is insane. Like, how are you guys getting away with all this? And he says, by meeting people at gas stations, obviously. And I found out that he's not the only one doing this. There's several of these guys around LA that are just like millionaires from selling mushrooms like this, growing in these mansions. And that's where all of the mushrooms of LA are really coming from. So every time you see those like chocolate bars, those Venice chocolate bars or any of those, that's where they're getting it all. So it's pretty cool to see, but reckless.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's nuts. So
I
next, we got to get into mushrooms.
Yeah. So we got to get into what are those vans called where they drive Star Tours, where they drive around to the celebrities' house?
Oh yeah,
do that with the mushroom mansions.
Yeah.
Mushroom Star Tours. Well, the concept of not doing something every day is weird to me. Like, I'm always going to have my coffee at the same time every day, but you have to go off of microdosing, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different protocols, if you want to call them. One was developed that said you take it on day 1, and then you take days 2 and 3 off, and then you take it on day 4, 5, and 6 off, and so on. And that's really because of the fact that mushrooms are it's like exercise for your brain. Your brain is going through transformation. There's neurite outgrowth happening, and if you're doing this every day, it can be very taxing. So you want to give your brain a recovery period to kind of establish those connections and retain them. And if you're doing it every day, you won't have that effect, and you can potentially wear your brain out again, theoretical. And so, yeah, they recommend kind of cycling it that way. There's different cycling regimens that different people have put together, like day 1, 2, 3 on, day 4 off. But who knows at this point?
That's what Dude at Party told me when he handed me the box. It was like 3 in a row, 2 off or something. Yeah. I don't know.
I think everyone's just making their own up at this point. But that's kind of the idea. Psychedelics are also, you can definitely build a really high tolerance very quickly. So if you do a heavy dose of mushrooms a few days in a row, the effect will really start to wear off. But fortunately, I feel like mushrooms are so anti-addictive. I've never done like heroin, but I heard, 1 or 2 doses, you can get hooked pretty quickly. But mushrooms almost have the opposite effect. If anyone's ever done a hero's dose, or just a high enough dose where you're really tripping, the next day you really don't want mushrooms anymore. You're kind of like, okay, I'm good. I can definitely take a break. It's interesting in that way. I think that's a big benefit from keeping you from overdoing it, at least.
I feel that way with Korean barbecue. For sure.
Yeah. My pants are too tight. I'll give it a week.
It is fascinating. It makes me want to experiment. I got at least 4 now to mess around with. Well, do you ever combine them? Is it like, lion's mane is so good when you put tiger's milk in it?
And a red wine.
Yeah. Some mushroom chocolates, a little bit of wine. Our company does make different blends of medicinal mushrooms. We'll put like a cordyceps for cellular energy, and we'll pair it with a lion's mane for brain function, and that can be our performance stack, things like that. Or we put several mushrooms together, like we have one blend called Immune Shield that has turkey tail, reishi, chaga, and we actually have a mushroom vitamin D that we put in it. So people don't know that mushrooms are the only food in the produce aisle that have natural levels of vitamin D. They, just like human skin, when they're exposed to the sunlight, they convert a chemical called ergosterol to vitamin D. And so we have a process of, we pick our mushrooms and we expose them to UV light, and it boosts the vitamin D levels up to 20,000 IU per gram, which was significantly higher than your daily serving. But that lets you take such a tiny little drop of our mushroom powder and you get your daily serving. So we add that to our immune stack. So yeah, you can definitely pair them. And, there's obviously ways to pair like psychedelic mushrooms too. There's one guy named Paul Stamets that's working on a stack of, looking at how we can pair lion's mane with psilocybin mushrooms, and how that can affect, extensive neurite outgrowth. And I know he's doing a good amount of clinical studies behind that. So it'll be exciting to see if that takes off.
That's crazy that it's like human skin.
Yeah. We convert to vitamin D3. Mushrooms convert to vitamin D2, but it works exactly like how we convert. So we basically just pick those mushrooms, and you don't even need our process to do it. If you go buy mushrooms from the grocery store and you put them out in the sunlight, they'll, even after they've been picked, they'll convert their own, cells to vitamin D, so you can get your daily dose like that. Just don't let them go bad. So.
I also saw this hippie documentary that was claiming that mushrooms are like the electrical system of the forest, and that they talk to each other underneath the soil. Have you heard any of this? Tell me that's normal or crazy.
No, that's normal. You're not crazy. It is cool in that sense. That mycelium network that's underground, the root system, it connects everything under our feet. So root systems of trees only go so far, and most plants benefit from mycelium underground. Over 90% have a symbiotic relationship with fungus. So what we know is that this mycelium from different fungi organisms or fungal organisms is growing underground and connecting root systems. So the symbiotic relationship they form is that when mycelium connects with roots, the mycelium will get sugars from the tree from photosynthesis, and then the mycelium benefits the tree in that it protects it from bacteria and different viruses underground as almost its immune system, and can extend the roots' reach for water and nutrients. So they form a really good relationship underground. What's crazy is the fact that two different species of plant can connect through this mycelium network underground. And they can, I don't want to say talk to each other, but communicate. But
you do want to say
it. I do want to say it. I can't. You got to refrain from getting too crazy. But yeah, for example, if one mushroom is starving from water or nutrients, it can get that from a nearby tree through this mycelium network. And that's super interesting to me, because you almost think there's this natural selection out there where species don't want other species to outcompete them. They want their own species to survive. So why would they be helping different species through this mycelium network? It's just interesting. I don't think we know nearly enough to really know what's going on down there. But the inverse is also true. We've found some instances of trees almost hacking into other trees through this mycelium network and robbing other trees of nutrients. So they go both ways. That movie didn't say anything about that, did it?
Tree hacking? No. That's crazy cool. So some trees are jerks and some trees are good.
Exactly.
That's probably the case.
If this podcast goes anywhere, it's that, you know.
I've never related to trees more.
So we always ask every guest about how they incorporate alcohol into their training, but I guess this is a little different. Do you use mushrooms to replace alcohol? Is there any sort of connection there?
Replace alcohol. I use mushrooms as to combat. You're saying alcohol, right? Like liquor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're usually like, hey, so do you tell people when you're training them that they can't get drunk anymore? And
gotcha. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever not drink. Drinking's fun, but I use mushrooms as a kind of way to get myself back into gear after drinking. Reishi is really great with liver detoxification, so I use that on after drinking and before drinking, like almost like prep myself. But yeah, I don't say that I have like a relationship with having to stop drinking for purposes of exercise. I think I'm young enough that it hasn't affected me yet, but I'm sure I'll get to the point eventually.
It's coming. No.
I know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
We've had both ends. We've had young people that were like, I can't do it anymore. And
really?
You're 20.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you start? And they're like, whatever. We've had sort of older. I still haven't gotten hungover my whole life, and people think, okay, you haven't drank hard enough, but I know that's not true. I went to Indiana University. I just think I haven't like felt it yet, and I met someone else that said the same thing, but he said one day he got hungover, and since then he gets it all the time. So I'm like praying that day never comes. So far, I've
heard there's a percentage of people that chemically can't convert to the acetaldehyde or whatever. Like there's something about you that will not give you a hangover, and it's just in your genes. So you might be one of the lucky people.
Wow. Great. Yeah, I hope so. I hope that day never comes.
Knock on wood.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about mushrooms as a hangover helper. See, it's not that you eat pizza the next day. It's that the mushrooms on the pizza.
Exactly. We have to have a hangover pizza.
Love it. Okay, so where can the fitheads find your alchemy mushrooms?
Alchemi Mushrooms. Our website is alchemimushrooms.com. Alchemy is spelled with an I at the end instead of the typical Y. You can find us there. Contact information is there if you want to reach out and learn more. We've gotten so many requests of like farm tours that it's been hard to do in these COVID times. If you're ever up north, definitely hit me up. You guys should come out and check out our mushrooms, our mushroom farms. It's a cool operation to see. And then for everyone else, we plan to do a kind of a virtual farm tour. Just so we can accommodate more people. So yeah, check us out online.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been enlightening.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys for having me.
I have a lot of functional foods to test out now.
Yeah. Sounds good. Let me know how it goes.
All right. And thank you to the Fitheads. If you can rate and review on Apple Podcasts, that helps us out a whole lot. And we will see you next week.